I guess we'll start. Should I wait for anyone? Okay. Okay. So some slides are similar slides that Al had, but I put them just in case. So I'll talk about some design issues that some of them Al mentioned and some new ones. So Al mentioned that all the efforts to start kidney exchange, about the incentives of the patients and the donors and the surgeons and so forth. He also mentioned about the hospitals incentive. There is more and more hospitals are participating in kidney exchange, and they are becoming the new players. I'll talk a little bit more about this, give some intuition what is going on. And because lots of those hospitals are becoming players, we see more and more highly sensitized pools. So lots of hospitals, turns out they are not showing lots of donors, for example, or patients that they can match internally. They just go and match. We see this. We start to see this in data now. I'll show a little bit of data. Which some of this is ongoing research, but this is both from personal communication. None of those centers are hiding that they are actually doing internal matches. They are saying, we have an internal match, why won't we just go with it? I'll talk a little bit about dynamic matching. So this is a world that patients and donors are not all at once there. And how do you do some dynamic matching? We have some preliminary, some results, actually not preliminary. Computational issue, and there's some congestion also going on that I will talk a little bit towards the end. We'll see what I mean by that. So this is the kidney exchange, two-pair kidney exchange. We all know about this now. Here's the blood type compatibility, who can give to who, which donor can give to which patient according to the blood types. But turns out that tissue type compatibility is also a very important thing, and every one of us develops in the course of, for example, transplant or birth or pregnancy, or if you're sick, you get blood transfusion, you develop antibodies, and you can take less and less donors the more antibodies you have. And there's a measure called panel reactive antibody. That's the percentage of donors that you can take, percentage of donors that you will be tissue type incompatible to in the population. So the more antibodies you have, the higher the PRA you have. Okay. So Alan showed this graph, and if this graph we had lots of participation, then we wouldn't need to do very large exchanges. We would be okay with just doing 3 ways and maybe sometimes 4 ways, but usually just 3 ways, or even mostly just 2 ways. This is the long side of the market. Those people who have over demand or are under demanded pairs, who have a blood type, often blood type O patients, people who have the blood type of the donor is worse than the blood type of the patient. So they're on the long side, and they are competing for those over demanded pairs, usually with O donors. Yes. So here, large means that there's lots of pairs for each. So this is a pair type. This is a patient, all the pairs with patient B and donor A. So think about there's lots of them, and there's lots of every pair type here. Okay, so there's lots of if we have lots of those that are participating, they're here today, or maybe we don't even need really here today now, but a lot of them, there's a very thick pool, then we know how would efficient exchanges would look like. We know who would match to who.
The current pool is possible to apply this theorem?
So current pool, no. Okay, so I'll talk about that. Okay, so when another way to apply this theorem is not to have a very large pool, but ignore tissue type compatibility. Just if I'm blood type compatible to you, then a similar theorem will hold. But we do have people who are very highly sensitized, and then we cannot use this assumption. But there's a nice paper by Utku Unver about dynamic, essentially large pools. He doesn't think about its large pools, but he takes away the assumption that might be tissue type incompatible. So it's essentially like thinking about this, but he's looking at a dynamic model every every other day someone arrives to the pool, and he says, what will be efficient outcomes in the long run? And his characterization looks like basically this construction. He knows that he shows that the AO pairs will match to the OA pairs, the ABA pairs will match to the AAB pairs, and so forth. And you see here in the efficient, if you have a very large pool, you will see here that there's sometimes three ways that take pairs that are A. You can do a three ways with an BO pair, an OA pair, and an AB pair. Okay, so sometimes we need to use those three ways. And his optimal solution tells us basically that if we have too much of those AB pairs, do with them three ways. So in the current pool, so this again, it's a dynamic solution, it's a dynamic pool, and he looks at the state of how many AB pairs I have right now, and he says if I have too much, use them for a three-way. If I don't have too much, use them in a two-way. So he used this in a smart way, in a dynamic sense. So he solves a dynamic program using all of, if you heard about Bellman equations, it's a nice paper to look at. Again, the assumptions here is that everybody is tissue type compatible, so it's essentially like there's no problem of waiting too much. If I'm a BA, I'm part of a BA pair, very quickly someone will arrive with an AB pair that I can match to. Okay? Once someone arrives, I can match to because there's no tissue type issue. So I mentioned hospitals are becoming players, and they are doing lots of internal matches, and that causes lots of pools with lots of very hard to match pairs. And I'll show this example of incentives that if two pairs from hospital A can match to each other, maybe a hospital might be that hospital A might be worried to show it to the clearinghouse because maybe this pair from hospital B has a high priority, and then A2 doesn't get matched. Is this a real problem, though, in practice? How likely is this going to happen? So because this is just a simple example, and also this was just a very simple example. How likely is this? How should centers really worry about this situation? So let me first, before I show you some explanation, here's a little bit of data. This is from the National Kidney Registry. This is not data that we collected. This is the director of and people there gave us, and they show that they talk to centers, and they have some. It's hard to trust exactly this data, but they say they have some understanding who are the centers that show all the pairs and who are the centers that don't show necessarily all the pairs. So some centers they trust, and they tell them we show all the pairs, and what you see here, there's something called PMP, pair match power. What is the pair match power? Is basically how likely the patient, how many people, percentage of donors the patient will match times how many patients the donor will match to. So it's kind of a multiplication of how likely the pair together can be part of a two-way exchange, for example. Okay? And this is what's the percentage of easy to match pairs, where easy to match pairs is just defined by some threshold for this pair match power. So above some threshold, you are easy to match pairs. Okay? And if below that, you are considered hard to match. So this is just something that they showed, and they looked at different kinds of variation of this pair match power, and you see that the all-in centers are putting much more easy to match pairs into the pool. Okay, here's some data that actually I collected. Yes.
A, B, and C. If that's not exhaustive, it doesn't add up to 100%.
Oh no. There's different types of measures. No, it's just different types of measures. So PMPA is just how. If I look at just the blood type and the antibodies, how likely I'm calculating the compatibility between patients and donors only according to that.
Ways to calculate.
Yes. So here they consider also preferences of patients and donors and things like that. Yes.
I'm not sure. What would be the change if everyone will give all the information?
Yes, so we do have this in a paper with Al, but we still need to do more research about this in the dynamic sense. What is the difference? I will show some results related to this question later on, okay? Here's data we collected from UNOS. UNOS is the National Organ Sharing Network that has data about all the deceased transplants and the living transplant, and also centers, when they do part of a kidney exchange, they are supposed to say this is part of a kidney exchange and not just live donation. It's not accurate data because people just enter data and enter those boxes, and sometimes it's not accurate. But here's some rough some rough idea of efficiency, if you measure efficiency of how many O donors are actually going to go into O patients. So first of all, here's the percentage of O donors that are going to the National Kidney Registry. The National Kidney Registry is today the largest clearinghouse in the United States. They passed 1,000 kidney transplants, and they started around 2007 or 8, I think. And here's the percentage of O donors that are part of, that hospitals don't show. If you look at the pool of only hospitals and the pairs that they don't show to the clearinghouse, to the National Kidney Registry, you get 55% of O donors. So you see that they are not showing all the O donors here. Okay? So again, what I'm looking here is just the hospitals that participate in the National Kidney Registry. What's the percentage of the O donors that are transplanted through the National Kidney Registry, and what is the percentage that they transplant internally? And here you see how many of those how many O donors go to O patients when those are transplanted through the National Kidney Registry, and versus how many O patients, if you just look what centers do internally, how many of those O donors go to O patients. So it's much less of a percentage. And how many of those O donors go to recipients which are not O donors, but also low sensitized. So they're very easy to match patients. So this is really you can consider this almost a real waste. Okay, so here you might think that, okay, maybe I'm taking an O donor and transplanted it in O patient that is very highly sensitized, that's okay. But this is.
How come 92 plus 33 is a lot more than 100?
No, so these are O percentage of O. It's not the same as so O donors who go to low sensitized AB and AB. I'm not looking at all AB and AB.
I don't understand. What's the denominator? What is the denominator?
So I'm looking at all the O donors that were transplanted. The transplant was facilitated through the National Kidney Registry,
Right.
and how many of those O donors went to O patients?
92%.
So 8%,
Yes.
only 8% left for the others.
Yeah, so only 8% of the O donors didn't go.
Oh, okay. So O patients.
So this has got to be a
So this is given that you're going to an AB and AB. What's the percentage that you go to a low sensitized AB and AB? Yes, sorry. So given that the O donor is not transplanted to an O patient, what's the chance that it's not? What's the percentage of transplants that it went to someone that is also low sensitized? Okay. So if you really want to transplant an O donor in A patient, make sure that the A patient is very, very highly sensitized. Otherwise, it's just a waste. Now, again, consider the only people who have a PRA above 98 or something are really considered hard to match. Otherwise, if you have an 80 PRA, it used to be that people thought about as hard to match. But 80 PRA is like you have a chance of 1 to 5 to match to a donor. It's not that highly sensitized. Okay. Okay. So let me talk a little bit about whether hospitals should really worry about not showing O donors or easy to match pairs. So here we looked at this very large graph, and we saw that there's lots of O patients versus O donors, and that's reasonable because lots of patients that have an O donor are compatible and don't join the pool from the first place. So an O patient who has an A donor will join because by default they're not compatible. So we're going to see more O patients than O donors. So imagine you are running a hospital and you have this two-way exchange, okay? and you show it to the clearinghouse, you show it to the National Kidney Registry, say, and you know that this guy is going to compete with lots of other O donors, O patients, over this O donor. Over those, there's only a small fraction here. So he doesn't have much chance, really. He has only some constant probability, let's say, even if the pool is large, to match to this O donor, or to one of those O donors. Okay, so they're really worried not to transplant this O. Yes? Yes? Can you speak up? Yeah.
Given that they only give them to the AB and AB recipients, at least they do so only with the low. So those low PRA, are they?
Yeah, low PRA is someone that is easy to match. Has okay. High PRA is if you have lots of antibodies and you're hard to match. Okay. By the way, this is also, we should look at this with caution, because even though this is a low sensitized, maybe this guy, this pair with who has an A patient, maybe he has a donor that can give to someone who's very highly sensitized, and then maybe you want to do this three-way. So there's a lot of things to really check here and see that it's really inefficient what hospitals are doing internally. So here really the O patients are going to compete, and might worry if you can already match an O patient with an A donor, you might want to just do it. Okay, and we in this paper, we give a theorem that at least in a large pool, we know how to design incentives that will give, if you have more O donors, I will know how to match your O patients that you won't want to not reveal them to the pool. So essentially, what we're looking at is how many hard-to-match pairs you can match. And for example, here, this is considered now the hard-to-match pair because he's on the long side of the market. And the more easy-to-match pairs you're putting in, the more probability or priority you're going to give to your hard-to-match. So I don't want to get too much into this, but the way we do this in the large market is think about how many of those hard-to-match you can match, and I will guarantee you at least as much, and you need a little bit more in order to get incentive compatibility, at least in the large pool. Okay. So here, for example, if you look at an individually rational participation constraint, if this is a hospital that can do either this two-way or this two-way, you want to guarantee the hospital at least 2 transplants, but you don't want to guarantee him. You want to guarantee them, so at least 1 transplant. I'm sorry, because 2 transplants. Either he can do this and this, and he can do this and this. So you need to guarantee him 2 transplants. But what he really cares about is matching at least one of those. Okay, those are easy to match in the large sense. Yes.
Is the reason they want to do everything at their own hospital for revenue reasons? Can you just pay them money or something for every lost transplant?
So you cannot pay money, but you can start counting points in some sense and use that as use a point system. And
Hospitals get money for the transplants.
yes, they get a lot of money for each transplant.
The hospitals are doing lots of transplants.
So one possible solution is have a frequent flyer program that once I match for example, if you enroll an easy to match pair, I will give you points for this. Or if I match for you an easy to match pair, I will give you points for this, and remember this. And once you are matched a hard to match pair, I will take from you some points. So that will be a more dynamic system, and we're thinking about those kind of things now in order not to look, so we don't have to look at just a large static pool. But those kind of things are very relevant. Let me just say that in the National Kidney Registry, already it's providing incentives for hospitals to put in altruistic donors that can start chains. So remember, if a hospital gets an altruistic donor, it's very easy now to go and transplant it and start a chain internally in the hospital. So what the National Kidney Registry does is tells them, give me your altruistic donors, enroll it to the clearinghouse, and I will remember this, and I will end a chain in one of your hard-to-match patients on the waiting list. Okay? Yes?
This altruistic
So they can do that, but you don't always you're not always aware of this. So some of them do come directly. Some of them just go to the transplant center next to their home, and yeah. Okay, so not everybody is aware. Even patients who need kidneys are not always aware of this. Yes.
So this is related to the first question. There's a constraint on people to find a cell kidney, which could be repugnant. Like, is there any constraint for hospitals to trade how many pairs because they receive financial compensation? Could they trade among each other how many transplants they do? Could they use money to compensate each other?
So I don't think they can use money, but maybe they can try and see. But legally, you cannot use money right now. But even points, I'm not sure is legal. But right now, a few months ago in the National Kidney Registry, they came up with a memo to send to all the transplant centers, and they said, centers that are willing to sign, we are all in. We always put all our pairs in. They will get priority in the matching. It's not going to go through. Now there's a proposal for a point system. If you put an AO pair, you match an AO pair through the National Kidney Registry, you get this amount of points. If you match AB pair, you get those amounts of points. And we take away from you points when we match for you pairs that are on the long side of the market, those hard to match ones. And that is going up for a vote. There's some issues with the points, I think, but it's going there. I don't know if this is legal, but I think something like this is probably necessary. Yes. Okay. So what is going on with the pools? The pools that we see in practice because of those strategizing of hospitals who show mostly hard to match pairs. Here's the percentage of easy to match patients, low sensitized patients in UNOS, people on the waiting list. So there's about 90% who are very easy to match and about 10% who are hard to match. And if you look at the Alliance for Pair Donation, which is a clearinghouse for kidney exchange, you see very different numbers in different data sets. So there's much more, a large percentage of people who are hard to match. And though these are the graphs that Al showed you, by the way, some of those pairs the patients who are easy to match, some of them are actually O patients with A donors. So even they are in some sense hard to match. It's not just low sensitized patients. You need to think about a pair if it's a hard to match or not. Okay, so I'll take now a detour now and talk a little bit about dynamic matching. I offer a model that is quite a very abstract model, and then show you some results about what do we do if pairs arrive over time, how do we match them in those hard to match pools. And then I will talk a little bit more about practical issues that we see today, more of a Elliot Pearson kind of a talk. That would be the second one. Okay, so here's a question for you. So suppose we are allowed to do only K-way, 3 ways or 2 ways exchanges. I will ask the same question about chains. And here are policies that are, these kind of policies are used in practice. These are kind of, one type of policy is a greedy policy. Whenever a pair arrives to the pool, if it can be part of an exchange, we do this. We try to match it. Another more general type of policy is batching policy. We wait for a week, we wait for 2 weeks, and we get more pairs in the pool, and we now try to find the maximum number of transplants, or maybe with priorities to highly sensitized and things like that. Okay, so these are things that are actually happening in practice. I'll say a few things. And a general question, what will be better? Do we want to wait or not? Okay, given that this is the stream of patients that we have, we want to ask this kind of question. Can we do something to get more transplants using different kinds of policies? Okay. Here's what is happening in practice. So the Alliance for Pair Donation started with long batches. They move now to almost daily matches. So once someone arrives, they just try to match him. If it matches, they go through. The National Kidney Registry is doing daily, even sometimes more than once. There's this guy, Garrett Hill. He's the director of the National Kidney Registry. He just, when someone comes, he presses the button. If something doesn't go wrong, he presses the button again. And he doesn't wait for anything. So, yes?
Based on something more just learning by
Is it based on something? So this was just experience. So now you can think about these also as competing exchanges. Some pairs are registered to several clearinghouses. Most of them are not. Usually a transplant center works with only one of them. UNOS is running now weekly. They just moved from weekly to bi-weekly. So they used to run every Monday. Now they're running twice a week. That means I'll tell you more about what's the schedule of things that actually happen later after these results that I'll show. Okay, so does greedy better or batching? And there's the other policies, of course. You don't have to do something only that is one of those two policies. You can do something much more sophisticated. Look at your graph structure and as a function of this, decide who to match and not. Okay, so here's some simulations results that, so maybe I'll actually show those. If you look at the number of matches that you can do, where this is the batch size, if you wait every day, if you wait a week, if you wait every 2 weeks, and so forth, this is the number of matches that you can do when you take data of 2 years. Now, of course, if you wait a lot, you can match more, but then you pay in waiting. So here's the waiting. The average you take average of waiting time over pairs, how much they wait in the system. Okay, you match more, but you wait more also. Okay, this is just simulation results. Yes?
And how much does the quality of the organs decrease, or the life of the people?
So patients who wait, it's not always good for you. It depends on what stage you are, before dialysis, after dialysis, but it's not very good for you to wait as a patient. Donors can wait, of course. Okay? This is a very big difference between deceased allocation and living donor allocation. Deceased allocation, we have to just allocate the organ right now. Donors can wait. How much patients can wait is a different story.
But according to your graph, it would make much more sense to take, let's say, for example, 3 months. Because the waiting time is a little bit longer.
Okay,
but
yes.
the increase in number of matches.
So this is not, you're right, this is not for me to decide, this is now for doctors to decide how costly is it. But yeah, from these results, it looks like 3 months makes a lot of sense, yes. But there's lots of other issues that cause really people to do things not to wait. It's not, that I'll talk about in the end. Yes?
Is the tissue type compatibility also changing over time or depending
No,
on
tissue type, well, you can gain antibodies over time if you wait. You go through some blood transfusion and you get more antibodies.
change dramatically?
No, not dramatic. Not in the course of 3 months, usually. Yes. Yeah.
So do people die in this?
So in these simulations, people don't die. Yeah. Yes. Yes. Okay. Yes. This is a very stylized simulation also. No, it's simulation with real pairs, but not too many. Actually, some practical assumptions that I'll talk about a little bit later. So here's a very abstract model, only with hard to match pairs. So we're looking at there's at each time t a node in a graph or a pair arrives to the pool. And that pair is going to connect to every other pair in the pool right now independently with probability p. And every pair is going to can give a kidney to that node that just arrived independently with probability p. Okay? So it's kind of those graphs that Al talked about, those Erdős-Renyi graphs, but only nodes are arriving. Every day one node arrives. And now if I match, nodes leave the system. Those that are not matched stay in the system. Okay, so this is an Erdős-Renyi graph, but a dynamic graph. Okay, and it's each time there's no Poisson arrival process or anything like that. It's deterministic. Okay, and I'm limiting the cycle size. I'll talk also about change. The cycle size to be at most 2 or at most 3. Those are the exercises that we will do. And the objective is to minimize average waiting time. Okay, so far we didn't have any notion of waiting time. And if you're familiar, ever heard about Little's law, this is a kind of a queuing model where the arrival rate is just 1 per day, then the average waiting time is the average number of nodes in the system. Just this is, okay? So we will call this measure W, and we want to minimize this W. Yes?
Does the nodes arrive quite frequently, or?
So here, you're asking in practice or here? In practice, it depends on the clearinghouse. In the National Kidney Registry, it's about 40 pairs a month, maybe 40 to 50 now. Yeah, something like that. Yes?
Is there an in-yearly differentiation in when people arrive more? So, for example, in Finland, I guess people drink more alcohol during the summer, so maybe during the fall.
Okay, I didn't model this here, but I don't know about Finland. But no, it's in this data. It's pretty the same. But yeah, okay. And what we are looking at is sparse pools in the sense. So if the probability to match someone was pretty high, if you were low sensitized, all this exercise wouldn't matter much. Everybody would wait just a few days until someone would arrive and match. So we really care about when P is small, okay? So when it's very hard to match, so we're going to consider how the number of nodes in the system scale when P goes to 0, okay? Or what is the average waiting time when P goes to 0, okay? How the things scale, okay? And if you look at just two-way cycles, in order that I will be part of a two-way exchange with Paul, it happens with probability P squared. So if you look at steady state, a cycle will form pretty much with probability half, and then you get that the average waiting time with the number of nodes in the system will be about 1 over P squared. Okay? And you can show using simple Markov inequalities, or here it's very simple, that a node will have to wait at least 1 over P squared. So in this model, a greedy algorithm is optimal. So there's no reason to wait with any node, regardless of what's going on. So the greedy algorithm gives you an average waiting time of 1 over P squared, and any algorithm will give you an average waiting time of at least 1 over P squared. Okay, so in some sense, it's some good news, okay? Or to know what's happening to the average waiting time. What about if k equals 3, then one exercise you can do is to get some intuition is see, let's look at batching algorithms that you pull to wait for lots of pairs to arrive and see how many pairs do I need to arrive in order to clean the pool, and maybe that everybody will match, and then wait the same amount of time that everybody will again match, and so forth. And in order to clean the pool, so if you have a batch size of n, you get this number of triangles roughly, and then in order to clean the pool, you get that n has to be about 1 over p to the 3 halves. So 1 over p to the 3 halves is much better than 1 over p squared in terms of waiting time. P is going to 0, right? So already three-way exchanges, you see that in a dynamic system, are giving you much more, are decreasing the waiting time much more than two-way exchanges, okay? This is just in a batching sense. But so here's some simulations results for in this model, and you see that the average time just goes up as you wait more. This is the batch size. And similar for other probabilities. So P equals 0.05 is something realistic in those hard to match pools that we see. But we get that the greedy also achieves 1 over P to the 3 halves. So our result here says that the average waiting times if in this greedy algorithm is this amount, but in any monotone policy, which I'll say in a minute what it is, has to achieve at least this amount. A monotone policy basically means that if I can donate to Inbal, and now I cannot, or if I compare an algorithm that if I connect to Inbal versus I cannot connect to Inbal, Inbal and I are not worse off because I can donate to Inbal. Okay, a monotone policy cannot make us worse off because of that. Yes.
Do you have some examples where it's strictly worse?
Why is it? No, it's not strictly. This is any non-monotone policy has to achieve at least this. The batching policy that batches all those, that weights this amount, pretty much achieve the same. Okay. So I'll go quickly over those. I won't go into much proofs. I'll just get the rough idea how it is proved is you start with assuming why is greedy good? You start with assuming that the waiting time is larger, and you start analyzing. You're showing that there is a drift that will make the pool smaller and smaller. More and more pairs will match quicker if you actually, on steady state, have a very large waiting time. That's the rough idea. What about chains? I'll just show you. So we do the question when we ask what is doing better, greedy or a batching policy. We start with one altruistic donor in the pool, and and we look at the graph. Once the altruistic donor can start a chain, we start it, and the last guy in the chain becomes the new altruistic donor or the bridge donor for tomorrow, and then we continue. So we only look at one chain in the pool and see what's the average waiting time. So once this bridge donor can connect to someone else, we will continue. Okay? And we again ask what is doing better, the greedy or a batching policy. Just using chain, no cycles even. And we get that the average waiting time here is 1 over p. So 1 over p, and again, greedy is the optimal thing to do here. So you see here, there's some also even more foundations why chains are doing so well compared to 3-ways and 2-ways. You get an average waiting time that is much better than the others. Okay? Yes.
We're talking about the average waiting time.
Yes.
How about the waiting time for the hard-to-match patients? If you use
Yes.
greedy?
The hard-to-match?
Hard-to-match patients.
Yes.
With the
So this is
waiting time
just
for them.
this is just a homogeneous, hard-to-match pool. Yes. Yes. This is an important assumption here, actually. Yeah. Okay, here's the summary of the findings. In any one of those technologies or settings, you get that the greedy is the optimal policy in terms of average waiting times. Okay? Okay. Yes?
Question, and do you consider dying patients this model?
No, there's no dying here.
Because if you consider that some patients die, then waiting time is not.
Then it's not clear, and there's, I'll mention in a minute, there's a related paper now. If I knew when you die, then I can use this in my benefit. There's a paper by a couple of students from Stanford, another one from Berkeley, who are looking at if you know deadlines of people. Deadlines actually do exist, not just patients, do exist for altruistic donors in practice. Then maybe I can do better by a bit of waiting.
But probably dying is also like random.
It's a random thing. No, so this is just first kind of results for dynamic matching. I think we still need more research about this. What if you had the pool of easy and hard to match pool, a combination? Can you do better with some waiting, with some pooling over time? Okay, and if you do, how much to wait and so forth. So I'll just give some intuition here. If you allow 3-way exchanges, things start to become a little bit different, and we need to study this. We have some preliminary results on this, but basically, suppose this is a low sensitized patient, and this is a high sensitized patient, and this is the pool that I observe now, or at least the connectivity in the pool that I observe right now. So this is time. At this point, this low sensitized patient, or the easy to match pair, the donor can give to this hard to match pair. But at this time also, these two easy to match pair can do a 2-way exchange. Do you go and do this 2-way exchange? This could be the donor here that can give to the hard to match patient could be the only chance of this hard to match patient in the next 6 months or something. So in this case, you might want to wait because you might be able, if you get more easy to match pairs in the system, you might want to wait and close a 3-way with an easy to match. It's not so likely that you will close a 3-way with a hard to match, but with an easy to match. And this is why it's so important to bring those easy to match into more of them to be able to close those kind of 3-ways and and be bridges and chains and so forth. So a little bit of weighting helps here, and understanding this Pareto frontier is an interesting question. Okay, so you have to wait. You have to punish those guys a little bit, even though they can exchange today. But it's not too bad because this guy will match tomorrow with someone else. Okay. So a little bit of weighting with 3 ways is beneficial. With 2 ways, you can't really benefit if you just limit yourself to 2-way exchanges. So basically, you need to weight a lot. If your batch size is small, if you're going to not weight a lot, then no, let me just skip this. But basically, you cannot benefit. So there's some growing literature on dynamic matching. This one I mentioned that it's using this very dense model that there's no tissue type incompatibility. Akbarpour, Lee, and Garan are looking at the 2-way exchange model, also in a very sparse pool, and they are asking the question: what if people did have deadlines, and can a little bit of weighting help here? And then they find that the answer is yes, and they also know how to. They come up with a mechanism that elicits the deadlines in a truthful manner. So suppose you don't want to state your true deadline. When are you not going to be able to donate anymore? And deadlines of altruistic donors is a real thing. Some people who are willing to just give their kidney to someone they don't know, they say, I'm willing to do this only in the summer. I'm not teaching now, and this is the time. No, that's something that happens all the time. Some clearinghouses are just missing transplant. For example, the UNOS had, about 3 months ago, they had 42 altruistic donors, and they used only 27 of them. All the rest they didn't use. So you need to know how to use them. It's important. Okay. Kidney exchange in the US. So now, from now on, I'll be more Elliot Pearson kind of tell you about what's going on and what are some practical issues. So here's some outcomes so far in some leading programs. Some of these are this is the the formal national kidney exchange program that started in 2010 that UNOS is running. This is in the US. They did so far, they're almost reaching 100 transplants. They started, 2010. This is the biggest single center program in the US. You see they're doing quite well. They did more than 240 transplants. The National Kidney Registry is very successful, and there's the Alliance for Paradonation that is also not bad. But this one is, you see, most of the transplants are done through chains. Also, most of those transplants are done through chains. You can actually, yes?
Do all hospitals can belong to several centers, or is that a joke?
Do all
A single hospital can belong to several centers at the same time? Or?
So single centers put their pairs in, could put their pairs in different places. Mostly they don't do it. Some of them put in the NKR and the UNOS one. But usually, for example, in the data that I looked at these 2 programs, almost no pairs are registered in both. Yes? Involving money. It's supposed to be jail, prison. That's the next talk. To optimize your prison time? Okay. I don't know. Are you willing to do that? Okay. So a lot of those transplants are done through chains. Here's something. So San Antonio, I said, is the largest single center program. There's several centers that are doing lots of internal matches. Some of them are just trying to operate by themselves. Here's a list of those exchanges San Antonio did. Most of them, some of them are missing. It's still till May 2013. They don't get much altruistic donors. They don't do much chains, but you see that even just one chain is already 10% of their transplants. they are good in getting, at least up to some point, they're good in getting compatible pairs. Patients who are compatible to their donors and are still willing to join the kidney exchange. And somewhere in the end of 2013, beginning in 2014, I saw that the number of transplants, the rate is a little bit going down, and I asked what's going on. One of the immunologists there, Kathy Murphy, she was telling me at middle of 2013, we changed our coordinator, the one that goes and talks to the patients. Turns out that was a good coordinator. So market design is also about those people who work. So they were just very good in attracting those compatible pairs who are pure benefit to the system. Now they got them. They got this coordinator back. Yeah. Okay, so you have all those. You have all those clearinghouses or single center programs. Yes.
And is there some interaction between them?
It's what?
Is there some interaction between these clearinghouses?
So okay, so can collaboration between exchange programs be beneficial? So some centers do collaborate between themselves, less between big clearinghouses, those multi-center clearinghouses. But there was a little bit, there was some attempt. So we did some, so this is simulations Al and I did for what would happen if you take the data from all those clearinghouses, the multi-center and the single center, and you see how many more matches do you get if they participate, if they collaborate. And the numbers you see here is if you just have one pool of those programs, okay, and the number in the parentheses is what would happen if everybody would just match, and every month, I think every month you take the leftovers and pull them together and see if you can do more transplants. Okay, so every program runs by itself, but leftovers every once in a while you get together and see if you can make more. Of course, you're going to make more than if you just had one program. Okay, so there you see those numbers here, and especially it helps those very hard to match ones, the very highly sensitized ones. Don't be fooled by the 63%. This goes from like 10 to 16 patients over 2 or 3 years. So it does help a lot, but so following this, so Al gave a presentation in the American Transplant Congress, and he showed this slide. Yeah.
Currently, the transplant center chooses the clearinghouse.
Yes.
We're talking about the dynamic of this choice procedure, whether this dynamic will lead to more clearing centers.
So some centers left working with the Alliance for Fair Donation, moved to the National Kidney Registry because it's doing more transplants. Some centers left the National Kidney Registry because they were disappointed from some issues that I will mention. So centers move, but not too often.
So in some sense, this division of clearinghouses is stable.
That's a different matching problem. I don't know. So it's pretty stable in terms, there's not too much motion of transplant centers. They work, some of them try to do matches internally, and some of them do both, match internally and put, but they choose some program and they work with them. If they're satisfied, they continue. We don't model that. So what will happen if you collaborate? So following this slide that Al showed in this presentation, the director of the NKR writes an email to a large group of people, consistent with our presentation. The NKR has begun to a program to provide the attached list of donors, so the attached list of donors with all the data. And they said, let's collaborate. Let's see if your recipients can find a match with those donors. So Mike Reese, who's the director of the APD, writes, that would be great, but every one of your donors has some recipient. How can we know if we do an exchange if I just see you're a donor? So there was a lot of issue of sharing data here, and till now we're not sharing data. What's happening is that I wrote an email, I'll be happy to facilitate those collaborations, and they're sending me the data, which is not so much fun. So we wrote a program, and we didn't do much transplants through the collaborations. And the reason is because they're sending only the leftovers. They never send me a pool where there's some internal match. Okay, and so far we did some transplants. Here's the first three-way last summer. Here's how sensitized those pairs were. We did a few more, and then now they're trying with other programs to do some collaborations. But it's not the best way to go. It's very slow, and yeah. Okay. So you want to ask, why not have just one program? And it might be a good idea in the long run, in a few years, to have one program. But we need to learn from our experiences, and lots of this. There's a lot of innovation going because of this competition between those programs and because of experiences of those programs, how they work. Everyone works a little bit different. So Mike Reese developed the idea of non-simultaneous chains and is trying to do some international exchanges. You might think a very interesting question that a very relevant question is, can there be benefits from international exchange? So because of diversity of antigens, maybe people in the US are less sensitized to people in Japan and things like that. That's interesting. So for that, you need data and to see what's the frequency of antigens in the populations. So San Antonio are very good with getting compatible pairs. I will mention something related to this novel cross-matching and what is a cross-match. NKR is starting to giving incentives first to altruistic donors. Now other programs are adopting that. And now they're thinking about doing a point system, a frequent flyer program. Okay?
Excuse me.
Yes.
About the rejection. Does it mean the hospital can reject test blood after the match is decided?
Yes, yes. So that's the next topic that I will talk about that I think is quite interesting. Okay. There's computational challenges. I'll mention those that once you have a pool, you need to find those 2-ways and 3-ways or chains. And if you limit the size of the cycle or even just look for a very long chain, that is very hard computationally. It turns out that just looking for the longest chain in a graph is very hard. So we, of course, developed some optimization software. And it turns out that actually you can find a heuristic that solves those problems like in 10 minutes or something like that. But you need fast programs, and actually more for simulations than for practice. So if in practice you can solve it in 10, 15 minutes, that's good enough because you run the program every day. But if you want to start checking, do simulations and test your policies, that's even more important to have very fast software. So we came up with some, we're not the only ones that came with some ideas, but we have now programs that work very, very fast, finding optimal solutions. Okay. So we talked about incentives for participation. And I want to talk about a different topic that is happening in practice, which is, I think, interesting. We didn't do at all work about this. Other people did work. It's pre-transplant failures. To do a blood test to see if I'm tissue type compatible to you, I have to do something that is called cross-match test. Okay, and if that cross-match test is positive, I'm actually not compatible to you. Okay, and people also maybe decide after an exchange is found, they might decide, no, I don't want to I don't want to receive this donor, and that happens too. And all of this is causing some kind of a congestion in this market. Okay, so let me just give you an outline what happens in practice after centers already decide which clearinghouse they work with. So transplant centers enter the patient and donor's data, including their preferences. So you might say, I don't want a donor who is more than 60 years old, or someone with lower weight than some number, and things like that. So you see more and more options for types of preferences that can be entered into the data. But of course, having a language that captures all your preferences is very hard. Okay, so it includes the medical data, the blood types, the antibodies, and so forth. So now after every center enters all the data, what happens in practice is that every period, usually daily now, is the clearinghouse runs an optimization algorithm and find exchanges. Those exchanges, so let's suppose I found that Paul can match Al, then I send those the centers that Al and Paul are part of, I send them, I'm sending Al Paul will be your donor and vice versa. So, and then they have to decide, are they willing to accept this donor or not. So even if they said yes in the preferences, it follows the preferences, it could happen that patients say no. And that causes some failures, and what happens is that exchange is not going to happen, and they go back to the pool. If everybody says yes in an exchange, it goes through a blood test. You have to ship the blood, and there's cross-match test, and maybe those cross-matches fail. Okay, so, and then if everything passed, you need to schedule the exchange, and it's conducted. Okay, so you think lots of things can go wrong during this time. And in practice, those failure rates, at least in some places, reached about 50% for a one-way. So if I have to donate to Inbal, maybe the chance that she will say no or the blood test will fail reached sometimes to 50% or even more. And that's huge. Okay? Okay. One thing to know about antibodies is that they're not binary. So it's not that if you have an antibody, you cannot take to my antigen. It doesn't mean that you cannot take my kidney. The antibodies have some intensity level, and if it's very high intensity level, you probably cannot. They're very intense. You cannot probably take my kidney. But different centers use with different thresholds. So some can do desensitization, and some just believe they cannot do, and they have some above threshold and so forth. Those intensity levels are not very good predictors, and I think we need some machine learning to do better prediction. What blood test is going to fail and things like that. So that's an interesting part here to make less congestion in this pool. So there is some optimization literature that takes the failure rates as given, and they do optimization given those failure rates. I think that's while mathematically very interesting, I think the real thing is how do we get better data? So one is maybe get a more sophisticated language to get more data or do better predictions. So data about those titers, which is how intense the antibody is, and more about preferences. And the National Kidney Registry was very good in doing this. They added a lot of things to their practice, and they reduced the failure rate on average from 20% to 3% for blood tests, which is dramatically changed the whole. It changes the congestion, but it changes also if you're a patient. For example, Northwestern had a patient that they found from them a match. It was part of an exchange. It failed. Then they had the same thing again, and they just stopped trusting the National Kidney Registry, and they don't put the pairs inside anymore. Okay, so those kind of things are very important. There was a question?
Yeah, so this means that having really long exchanges more than 3 is probably not that likely. There's a high failure rate, right?
So if there's a high failure rate, very long chains are not likely to be very long. That's right. But if you reduce the failures, so some of the chains are very long, but remember, they're not necessarily non-simultaneous. Three pair. More than 3 is very unlikely to have it. And also, we don't do them, yeah. So you can think about things like give priority to centers who actually go and do the tests ahead of time, or the cross-match test already passed, and things like that. The National Kidney Registry was also kind of punishing centers that actually say no after they said according to their preferences yes, and things like that. But things are changing over time a lot. But you see how it might be very important to deal with these things. So I think there's a lot of interesting research of how to get better data and reduce congestion here. Okay, so, and centers also have, this is important, centers have different capabilities and perception of what is an antibody, what is not an antibody, and things like that. Some centers can do desensitization, and what happens in practice is because of those capabilities, centers are starting to strategize which antibodies to show to the clearinghouse, because if I show more antibodies, I will see less transplants. And what Adam Bingaman from San Antonio is saying, if you don't have enough failures, you're not transplanting enough hard-to-match patients. So those failures, if you take them and given and optimize them using those failures, you are actually going to screw those very hard-to-match patients who fail more. In some sense, you want to have failures, but maybe not too much. So if I'm a highly sensitized patient, I'm more likely to fail a cross-match test with you, but I probably have to fail some tests until I find someone that matches me. Okay, so that's very important, actually. And that's why San Antonio are staying as a single center. They had developed this very large operation that they do an optimization, they find who can match this very hard to match patient, they go to the lab. It doesn't work, he goes back to the software, finds another match, goes to the lab, does the test, and so forth. So they don't want to put their pairs in clearinghouses that have a very high failure rate, because they say if everything, I need to ship my blood every time I find a match and so forth, I will just go to my lab. So it's not clear, for example, that large centers or centers that have some capabilities of testing fast and things like that really want to, is it beneficial for them to participate in those clearinghouses? So following all those complaints by some centers, actually it started with Rabin Medical Center that asked for some software here in Israel. We developed some software. It's online now. You can't go in. You need a password. You can enter the data. But one thing that we enter wasn't existing now in any other clearinghouse except the National Kidney Registry that allows this, but nobody uses it, is that you can put, for every antibodies, this is the antibodies that this patient has. This guy's not very lucky. What is the intensity of this antibody? And what we also wrote a code is that a center can enter those intensities of antibodies automatically from their own database. Instead of someone clicking everything by hand, you can just put it in. And what the center can do is decide what's my tolerance levels for different types of antibodies. For A's, I will have 2,000. This is some measure, okay? And for BW, I'll have some 150,000 and so forth. And they can play with it. If they drop it, they will see more matches. If they make it higher, they will see less matches and so forth. And then they can decide if they wanted to go to do a blood test and so forth. So here's one of the types of the outputs that they will see. This is CY is a cycle. I dropped all the names here. What you see here is some details of the donor. This is the recipient, donor, recipient. In the red is the antigens of the donor. In the blue, these are actually antibodies of this patient to this donor, but it passed because the thresholds are not so high. So now the transplant center can decide, do I want to do this test or not? Okay, so if this guy has lots of antibodies to this donor, it's probably not going to pass the test. Okay, so they don't have, we don't have really good predictors what's going to pass and what's not, but they can, from their experience, decide, do we want to waste donor blood and go to do a blood test or not? Yes?
Who does the cross-check or who decides that things pass? Is it the exchange or the different?
No, the hospitals. The exchange only sends, here's your offer, and then if you say yes, the center of the donor sends you, the center of the donor sends blood to the center of the recipient. Okay? So a center can also do this without seeing this, but it's very comfortable that it's over there and you can just see it and decide. And here's some centers that adopted this software. Sometimes, at least I'm not sure we're doing the right thing, letting people use this software, but Al was saying we should not make how did you say it? We should not make internal exchanges harder in order that we get more participation. So we need to improve technology, and by that, hopefully the clearinghouses will move forward. But software, I must say that software is not enough to get a good operational internal matching operation, because San Antonio are doing great. Some of those centers are smaller. This one is actually a big center. But they have lots of things beyond software that makes things go forward. They have a lab with a freezer, and they know someone is sitting right next to the software every day, and things like all those little things do matter in practice. I don't know how to model this everything in for economics paper, but I think it's interesting things that are going. One interesting thing that the National Kidney Registry has done recently, since beginning of 2014, they adopted the following policy. So centers can see also who they cannot match to. Okay, so I will not put you in exchange according to the data. So you might still have, again, you might put an antibody, and according to the data, I might not match you. I might have an antibody against you, but in practice it can pass. Okay, so centers who are not, a patient who is not compatible to a donor, the center can decide, I actually want to do this test. There's a chance that this test will pass. In the meantime, it doesn't interfere the matching system because this is offline, done on the side, and they can just go and test it. Now, it creates some sort of incentive for hospitals to actually go and do those tests that they think that might not pass, because if they don't do that test and it fails, maybe if they don't do that test, let me maybe give an example. So if you think this donor can come to this recipient, and so these two donors are potential donors for this recipient who is hard to match. Okay, and if I don't do these tests, and the clearinghouse matches me to this guy, it could be that I just lost a match because this guy was matched to someone else. So this might have passed, and this might have not passed, but I didn't test it, and the clearinghouse matched me to this guy, then I just lost this donor. So I think there's an interesting directions for research here to how to create incentives for hospitals to actually do some offline work that will not interfere the matching problem. So when we find exchanges and it fails, and I cannot donate to you because it fails, lots of other people are affected by this. How can we create incentives that you won't interfere or have externalities on other matches? I think that's an interesting topic. And centers are using this option in increasing rates in 2014. There's not enough time to report so much data here, but yeah. Okay. So let me summarize here. Is there any question about the antibody stuff? Okay. So let me summarize here. So current pools have many highly sensitized patients. And those highly sensitized, and then long chains are very effective. But there's another issue with highly sensitized patients, that they are more involved with those kind of failures, and we need to address those failures to reduce lots of congestion. That's an interesting, I think, topic for future. Pooling might help when, a little bit of weighting might help when there's heterogeneity in the pool, easy to match and hard to match. But when there's a lot of hard to match in the pool, we saw that greedy algorithms work quite well. In fact, when there's more and more failures, you want to do, failures are like kind of waiting, because if more people fail, it's like people are waiting more and more. And that's also a reason why greedy algorithms are not bad in practice. That's why, so clearinghouses are matching daily. If you have lots of failures, nothing is happening. And that's part of the reason why UNOS did, till today, only maybe 100 transplants. They never decreased the average, the batches less than a week. Yes. And I think so important questions about it's not clear that we want all centers to participate. Some centers, even if things go well, are very large, and maybe for them it's costly to go through a clearinghouse. You need to ship blood. All these things take time. Maybe they can just do what they can and do the best for their patients. So even in a dynamic setting, it's not clear that every center in order to get efficient outcomes to participate in such exchanges. So this is it's both an empirical and theoretical question, I think, that is interesting. And a very much broader question is, how do you attract those people from the waiting list, which is 100,000 people who are not joining kidney exchange? Right now we have about 500, at least in the NKR. Let's say, I'll exaggerate, about 1,000 pairs that join yearly to kidney exchange. And where there's 100 people on the waiting list. So if you get in even just 10% more, you increase a lot the pool. So that's a broader question. Yeah. Yeah.
And my last question is, do you know what the obstacles are for getting patients into the system? So one possibility is lack of awareness. Another possibility is lack of a donor. Another possibility is you have a donor, but for some reason the donor is reticent to donate their kidney. Do you have any kind of...
So lack of awareness is one. Lots of patients.
Can be at the hospital level or the hospital doesn't communicate the options.
So some centers, lots of centers are just small centers, and they're just not aware or don't have the capabilities to do all this. They don't have the human resources to do all of this, even though it's probably beneficial for them. I saw some survey that lots of people on the waiting list are usually all middle-aged men who are ashamed to say that they need a patient. Some survey like that I saw in some medical paper. I don't have. I still don't know myself. You know any other reasons? I don't know. Yeah.
We have only 100,000 people on the waiting list in the United States, but there are 400,000 people on dialysis.
Yes.
So there's even people not being told they should be on the waiting list. So we don't quite understand what's going on.
Yeah. And so now all those centers that I mentioned here that are using this software, some of them actually are registered in the National Kidney Registry. They just want to imitate San Antonio that are doing so well. So we give them software, but I don't think all of them can replicate everything. It's not just software that does make you do well.
I don't see any of the university.
What is it?
I don't see any of the academic hospitals.
No, so Northwestern.
It's so many. There's Harvard with Stanford with.
So MGH are some are participating in one of those programs, but mostly trying to do internally. Some centers just put more of the emphasis on the deceased allocation or the live donor without a kidney exchange. They don't put much effort to convince people to go to kidney exchange. So lots of them do have bad experiences from those clearinghouses, and they just say, it's not working well. We just got 3 transplants over the last year. So if we don't improve those kind of how to get this data, things will keep on going like that. Yeah. Yeah.
In terms of sharing information between hospitals, is it any different in Israel or Korea, where they might have a nationalized system rather than the United States, where hospitals are more private?
So in
I don't know if Israel or Korea.
yes, in the Dutch system, for example, they run every 3 months. So, and it's a social system. Everybody put the pairs. I don't know if they have any. I don't think they can even. They're not doing internal matches, but they run every 3 months, and they all collaborate. How better?
But are they reporting more truthfully, rather in the United States, where they might not report all their matches with fear of losing some matches?
Yes, over there, I think it's by law there that they all have to report their pairs. I don't know much. I didn't see any data about this. But that's what I hear from communication. Yeah.
I guess the cost being on a waiting list can differ quite a lot in countries, or how easy it is to get to a waiting list as get treated as dialysis treatment. So in some countries, like the majority of dialysis.
So that could be, even here I heard about from some nephrologists that think about pal care. Maybe not all the patients should go through a transplant, and we should think about different types of quality of life. It's maybe not beneficial for the country and for the patient. I don't know about costs in every country. I cannot tell you that. Yes? For each operation? No. So there's different insurance companies. Maybe Al knows more about this.
One of the frictions is we don't have a standard acquisition charge for a kidney. So one of the things that prevents kidney exchange in the United States from growing bigger is sometimes you exchange kidneys, but it costs one hospital $25,000 to get the kidney, and another hospital $100,000. So we now have a grant to try to establish what's called a standard acquisition charge, which is something we already have for deceased donor kidneys, but the costs are all over the place. There's all sorts of crazy stuff that we still have to work on. So, so what we've been telling you is kidney exchange about kidneys, but there's a lot of kidney exchange about finances as well that we still have to work out.
By the way, about those collaboration between clearinghouses, one of the experiences that I have here is that, or between centers, is that I did sometimes find exchanges, or they found exchanges between themselves, but they say, no, I don't want to do this because I'm giving an O donor and you're giving me only back a B patients. For example, our O donor who starts a chain and you return me a B bridge donor. I don't want to do that. So everything is calculated in those. Okay, thanks.
So, speak Hebrew?
Maybe English, because maybe I don't know. Maybe English. I speak Hebrew.
Okay.
אבל יש עוד אנשים. Yeah.
Okay, so what's the wait time you can wait till you actually do the transplant of, say, a deceased person or a live donor? If the wait time till you need to do the transplant, and you could have made some sort of bank without money, with just kidneys.
Yes.
If I give you a kidney, you give me one back, and therefore I wouldn't need the entire exchange system. I mean, I do have more kidneys than people.
Yes.
Usually.
So I'm not sure. I'm not sure I understand. What the timeline for what?
Well, let's say that there was an infinite time I could wait till I transferred the kidney from the time I took it from the person.
Yeah.
Then, since that person's give you 2 kidneys and live persons give you this one, you have more kidneys than people. And if you would establish some sort of bank.
Oh, a bank system would be interesting if, I just give a kidney and someone owes me. That's what you're asking?
Yeah, so I can, and then I will have some.
You're worried to get into a deficit in this kidney.
Well, yeah, but